But several years later, United Airlines had another incident where a plane lost all its hydraulics,
Right.
which meant they couldn't steer it either horizontally or vertically because they lost all the ability to to adjust the flaps and so forth. And they immediately went into this team mode. And as a matter of fact, they found out there was a captain sitting in the passengers, and they brought him up and said, let's expand the team. That would have never happened in the old days. And they found a way to crash land that plane, which is the only way it could land. And they were able to save 2 out of every 3 lives in a situation where, had it happened before, what is called crew resource management, which is the name for peer-to-peer network management in the cockpit.
Welcome to the Manage Self, Lead Others Leadership podcast with Nina Sunday for experienced and aspiring people managers. This show will help you explore ways to become a more intentional leader. Each episode, host Nina Sunday speaks with some of the brightest business minds on the planet who share a passion to elevate and transform team culture. Workplace culture hides in plain sight. Is yours flourishing? Join the movement to make your workplace a better place to work. Are you ready? Because it's time to manage self, lead others.
Rod Collins is a leading expert and thought leader on the future of business transformation. Rod has just published his new book, Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody, and he has multiple blogs, podcasts, and speeches that inspire through their use of storytelling and leading-edge ideas. Rod's most recent research is around how the exponential growth of the Internet of Things, developments in blockchain technology, and advances in artificial intelligence will merge together into an integrated network that will become the platform for a human-machine symbiosis that enables an extraordinary leap in human intelligence and the transformation of all human institutions. Coincidentally, the day before recording this episode, I attended an entire one-day workshop on AI and how it's transforming the business world. So our conversation starts there. Welcome, Rod Collins. Well, welcome again, Rod Collins.
Nina, wonderful to be back with you.
And you're one of my favorite guests on the program. This is episode number 4.
All right.
that we've been talking, and the last few episodes, and they'll be in the show notes, the different numbers, so people can binge watch you and binge listen to you. But we've been focusing on, nobody is smarter than everybody, which is the title of your new book.
Yes, it was released on February 20th.
Fantastic. And I wish you all the best with it, because it's an idea whose time has come, and today's conversation is about an idea whose time has passed.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit about how command and control is so yesterday. And here's the thing, Rod. Yesterday, I spent an entire day finding out about AI. And the finer points, it's not just about having a free ChatGPT account. It's way more than that. And you've got to keep up. And I'm going to start with a little quote about AI, but it's going to have relevance to what we're talking about hierarchical management.
Okay.
Seth Godin quote: AI is the biggest change in our world since the invention of electricity, a bigger change than the internet. Let that sink in for a moment. If you're not using it for half an hour a day, you don't understand, and you should. You need to put it on your calendar and go use it.
Talking about this model in the context of AI might be a good thing for us to do today.
Well, if companies or CEOs are still making decisions like vetoing their team's decision, right? Mm-hmm. They're making one person at the top making the final decision. And if they think they can continue to operate the same way they did, it's not even 5 years ago, the same way they did 1 or 2 years ago. AI, if Seth Godin is right, and he's pretty right about a lot of things, if it's bigger than the internet and it's about as big as the invention of electricity, we got to get on board, and we got to rethink everything, including decision making.
I would agree with him, and let's talk about this new management model in the context of AI, because I would suggest we don't have artificial intelligence today. What we have is artificial information.
Correct.
And look at the problem that Google ran into and had to pull back its AI application. And I think this will be an important venue for us to talk about, because it really demonstrates the battle between two fundamental models of organization.
Yes.
And the problem that Google had is it really had a centralized, top-down, hierarchical approach to AI. And if you do that, you're going to bring in all the problems that top-down command and control structures have. They are designed to leverage the individual intelligence of the elite few. That's what command and control is. They have coercive power, the ability to force people to do what they otherwise would not do. I think the problem with Google's first application of AI is it represents just one point of view. One might argue an elite point of view.
Can I just ask, is that Google Bard?
I'm sorry?
Is that Google Bard?
I think it's Google Gemini was released last week, and
Yes,
it was
changed its name.
pulled back. It was pulled back. And it's interesting that Google should find itself in this spot, because 25 years ago, Google was a leader in the other form of social organization, which is the peer-to-peer network.
Yes.
Google was the last search engine to come on board, but it quickly grabbed the market. Why? Because it leveraged the collective intelligence of all the users, no matter what their perspectives, to rank the pages. And it really is most people's first experience of dealing with the capabilities of collective intelligence. And I would argue it is collective intelligence, not AI, that will be the great game changer.
Right.
Now, if AI down the road, and I believe right now we have artificial information systems because they're being structured in these hierarchical structures. If we build AI in peer-to-peer network structures along the model that Google originally had for its search engine, then we're going to be tapping into the collective intelligence of everyone. And if we can do that at incredible speeds, this is where Seth Godin is correct. Then we truly will have artificial intelligence, because it'll be leveraging the collective intelligence of all of humanity. And if it can do that at rapid speeds, it's going to take us to a higher level of intelligence. One of the points that I make in the book, Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody, which is the design principle of this peer-to-peer network, in contrast to the design principle of the top-down hierarchy, which is to trust authority. And right now, I think many of our listeners don't trust authority, and they're coming up with many reasons why they shouldn't. And as we look forward to AI, AI will be transformative once we use collective intelligence mechanisms to gather all the intelligence that's out there. When we do that, we truly will have AI. And when we do that, I think humanity itself can evolve to a higher level. But if we don't use the peer-to-peer network, if we stay stuck in centralized hierarchical structures, then we're going to leverage the intelligence of an elite few along with all their biases, and we will not have very smart information. And that's kind of a pivotal crossroads, and AI is going to be in the middle of it.
Absolutely. You did send me a chapter, which I actually printed off because, I can make notes on paper and refer to them. And you gave a few examples of where command and control hasn't worked, and you actually gave us a historical context around, some of the early thinkers being Taylor and then Fayol. Is that how you say it? The French guy. And then you
Yes,
gave us the example
Henry
of
Fayol, yeah.
and the anecdote around Blockbuster, where
Yeah.
the management consultant was saying you can create better customers if you stop charging them late fees and making them angry. And they were so hostile, the elite management that were listening to his proposal was so hostile to the fact that they'd be losing profits from late fees that this consultant actually said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, and I won't charge you. I apologize for wasting your time." And it was the guy was definitely on the right track. It's unbelievable. And then I think the ability, the lack of acquiring Netflix was the decision of one person at the end of one meeting.
Yes, it may be. So for our audience purposes, they may be surprised to find out
Oh, who's
that
Blockbuster?
roughly about 25, 30 years ago, the co-founders of Netflix, who were like $55 million in debt, met with the CEO of Blockbuster and offered to sell themselves. And on that day, Blockbuster was worth about $6 billion.
With 9,000 locations, a store, video store.
Now, this shows you the dangers of leveraging elite intelligence, because John Atiaco, who was the CEO, had an unconscious bias. One might even argue a conscious bias. He said streaming will never affect our industry. And because he had the unilateral authority to make decisions, and he made the decision not to purchase Netflix, he did two things. One, he passed up a 50-fold growth opportunity, because at the end of, I think, 2021 or 2022, Netflix was worth $300 billion. And the other thing that happened is they gave up the opportunity to be what Netflix is today. One of the things that happens when you leverage collective intelligence is you are better poised for innovation, because when you are aggregating the thinking of everyone, the innovators will come in with new ideas that oftentimes challenge the way things are done. That's what happens when the co-founders of Netflix are sitting down with the CEO of Blockbuster. But if a team had made that decision in Blockbuster, rather than a single individual, perhaps they may have thought again and made the purchase. And if they did, Blockbuster would be the big name in entertainment, not Netflix. I can't overemphasize enough the importance of understanding that the highest form of human intelligence is our collective intelligence. And in order to tap into that, and this will be important as we build AI, you must have the four factors that James Sorowicki identified in his timeless book, The Wisdom of Crowds.
Right.
You must have diversity of opinion. And right now in the Western world, diversity of opinion has never been at a lower ebb point. Second, you must have independent thinking. People have got to be able to express their opinion without fear of retaliation. In other words, no censorship. Censorship makes us dumb.
Yep.
Not having censorship is the pathway to intelligence. The third thing is you need local knowledge. People close to processes, people close to customers in the business context.
And of course, the other example in this chapter is about airline hierarchy. The captain is always right.
Well, this was the flight of United 173. It's a story I tell in the book. It forever changed commercial airline, the commercial airline industry. What the NTSB team discovered as they listened to this is the whole principle of trusting authority, which is the foundational principle behind the top-down hierarchy, was badly misguided, because the captains believed, as you described, I got everything under control, I don't need any input. And that's exactly what happened on this flight. And what the NTSB team recommended, and United Airlines was the first to implement, but all the other world airlines followed suit, is they transformed the management model into the peer-to-peer network. So now the captain is a facilitator, not a dictator. Now everybody is free to express their opinion without fear of retaliation. You want to invite diversity of opinion. And through the course of their conversations, they were able to aggregate their knowledge. It's interesting. I don't tell this story in the book, I don't believe, but several years later, United Airlines had another incident where a plane lost all its hydraulics,
Right.
which meant they couldn't steer it either horizontally or vertically because they lost all the ability to adjust the flaps and so forth. And they immediately went into this team mode. And as a matter of fact, they found out there was a captain sitting in the passengers, and they brought him up and said, let's expand the team. That would have never happened in the old days. And they found a way to crash land that plane, which is the only way it could land. And they were able to save 2 out of every 3 lives in a situation where, had it happened before, what is called crew resource management, which is the name for peer-to-peer network management in the cockpit, everybody would have died because no one person could have figured out what needed to be done. And it's interesting, when Captain Al Haynes, who was the captain of that second flight, was interviewed, they said, how were you able to take this crippled jet and it crash landed in such a way that 2 out of every 3 people survived? And without missing a beat, he said, oh, crew resource management. If we had not used that approach, we could have never gotten this plane on the ground in such a way that we could save most of the lives.
Yeah, it's amazing that shift did happen in the airline industry. And that's a wonderful thing and makes me feel more comfortable flying.
One of the companies I talked about that was built upon this peer-to-peer model, they've never had any bosses, is Buurtzorg. They're in the Netherlands, and they do home health care, provide home health care nursing services. And this gentleman, Joost de Blok, was working in a traditional top-down hierarchical structure and said, there's a better way to do this. And so he left and started this little company. And the way he organized it is all of the nurses will be organized in teams of about 10 to 12 people. There will be nobody in charge of it. They'll all be responsible. They're all accountable. And they will manage their own group of patients in the way they see fit. And in doing so, they were able to reduce the costs by 33% because they provided more human coverage. Why? Well, when the teams did the assignments, they had the same person go to the same patient each time. In the old command and control model, well, we might have Nurse Sally on Monday, Nurse Jane on Wednesday, and Nurse Susie on Friday. Well, when the teams made those decisions themselves, no, Nurse Jane's going to see all of her patients all of the time. They establish relationships. It helped people get better. Today, 70% of the home health care nurses work for Buurtzorg. That growth happened organically. That's proof positive that this is a better organizational model than the command and control. Why? There are no powerless people in networks. Everyone shares in the power, and the power is synergistic. There's high energy.
How are we going to turn the ship around? What are the first steps, Rod?
The first steps are, don't work in silos anymore. Functional structures worked in the mechanical problems in the industrial age. All business problems in the digital age are complex. They can only be solved holistically. And therefore, people need to work in cross-functional teams. Those organizations who use this model work in cross-functional teams. And I think increasingly businesses are going to see the need for that because, again, the nature of problems has shifted. The next thing is you do need strategic leadership teams, and they should work as teams, and they need to be looking at the larger picture. But all decisions should be made by teams, whether they are strategic teams, operating teams, or service teams. And no single individual should have the authority to kill a good idea, keep a bad idea alive. No single person should make any decisions, no unilateral decisions. All decisions should be made within a cross-functional team-based context. Now, people might think, oh my goodness, that sounds like it'll be chaos. Actually, it's not. Teams make decisions faster than silos do because you don't have to run things up and down a chain of command. And when you're solving problems with holistic teams, all the things you need to take account of are rapidly identified and handled so that rework goes down. It's another reason why Birdsong cut its cost by a third.
And you're a former CEO of Guild, is that right? What was the name of your company?
I was the chief operating executive of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Federal Employee Program in the United States, which was a business alliance of 39 separate companies. So with necessity being the mother of invention, we were leading a network and we had to learn how to do that. And in so doing, we turned around our business and it resulted in the single largest 5-year growth period in the history of the business. Again, another demonstration, it's a better model.
And what inspired you? I mean, in the past, we talked about the example of the Gore company that make Gore-Tex, but what was the trigger for you to kind of move from command and control and hierarchy into this peer-to-peer approach?
It's actually a story I tell in the book. It goes back to when I was in college.
Tell us.
I took a course in social psychology, and the first day we showed up, there's 200 students in the classroom, and the professor says, this is the last class you'll need to attend. If you don't want to attend any more classes, that'll be okay. The test will be on the books. So there'll be nothing on the test that's not in your books. And that'll be half your grade. And then he said, listen very carefully. The second half of your grade will be based on your participation in a simulated society weekend in October. And if you don't show up, you'll get an F. And that'll be half your grade and you'll fail the course. And he said, if you have a wedding to attend that weekend, drop the course because this is mandatory. Anyway, when I showed up on the weekend, we were actually divided into 2 groups because the ideal size is 100. We had to fill out a questionnaire in advance. And I remember doing this. We were asked, what motivates you? Achievement, affiliation, or power? And I thought to myself, you know, the proper answers are achievement and affiliation. But power is what really motivates me. And I decided to be honest, and I checked power. Now, because of that, I was assigned the role of being the chief justice of the society. And so when I show up, okay, they went over rules with us that, for example, no more than 50% of people could be in any one of the 4 rooms that made up our society. We were constantly presented with problems. And it turned out the 2 most powerful roles were the Chief Justice and the President of the Society. And the President of the Society and I found out very quickly we had a similar approach to the exercise of power. And that is people should be free to do whatever they want to do as long as it's not at the expense of others.
Right.
And so let them gain all the wealth that they can as long as they're contributing with wealth. And so the 2 of us made decisions accordingly. And I always remember we got to the, and it was interesting to me how quickly people initially were trying to, garner things to their advantage, sometimes at the expense of others. But with the 2 of us in this position, guiding it in a direction that you can advance your own interest as long as they're not at the expense of others. When we got to the second day, somebody proposed, we need to finish this thing with a party. And it turned out our 4 rooms were actually 2 rooms on each side of the hall with a movable divider. So we said, we'll get everybody into one side, we'll pull back the divider, we'll have a party. And so the Supreme Court looked at it and said, there's nothing in the rules that says we can't do this. And the monitors were like, no, you're not allowed to do this. And I remember saying, show me in the rules where it says it couldn't be done. And they said, we can't. They said, will you postpone your decision for 20 minutes while we get the instructor, the professor who's over with the other group? 15 minutes later, he walks in the room and he says, you're going to have your party. And he says, after we have 30 minutes reflecting on this experience and you've earned your party, he said, you have accomplished what less than 5% of the society's accomplished. which is a fully functioning society. And in this society, we were periodically measuring our metrics as a society, and it was growing. It was socially cohesive. And what I learned out of that is there's two forms of power. There's coercive power and there's synergistic power. Coercive power is when people grab things for themselves at the expense of others, and they will lie, cheat, and steal to get what they want. We see that a lot in politicians. But synergistic power is a higher form of power. It is power with rather than power over. And it is setting up structures so that people can exert power to the fullest extent they can, but not at the expense of others. Which is why Chris Rufer, who is the founder of another company I talk about in the book that uses the peer-to-peer model, his foundational principle is no single person shall have the authority to coerce another person or their property. This is what we were doing in the simulated society. It forever changed my approach to management. And from the very first managerial job I ever had, I took this philosophy into it. And it helped me. I mean, I eventually became the chief executive of a $19 billion operation where we used this approach, again, to accomplish the single 5-year growth period. And so power isn't corruptive, it's coercive power that is. Synergistic power actually enhances humanity. It doesn't decrease it.
And it's wonderful that you had that experience as the chief executive officer of Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Blue Shield.
Yes.
Yes.
The
Federal Employee Program. So it was a particular program in America.
And in change, we talk about the difficulty, like Cotter talks about the difficulty of making change stick. I mean, how does a leader who believes in peer-to-peer network set it up so that succession continues that approach?
That's a great question, because a lot of leaders have done it inside traditional organizations.
Yes.
In the United States, another example is Alan Mulally, when he was at Ford, put this approach in. And if you don't eliminate the hierarchical structure and all of the titles and all of the positions, then the next leader can come in and say, well, that was a management style. I'm here now. Now we're going, and so one of the things I talk about in the book, if this is going to last, you have to set up a management system. It can't just be a management style.
Right.
And
that's a really good distinction.
Yeah, that, companies like Morningstar and Bertsorg, which we talked about in this conversation, they put this in place as a system from their birth. There's yet to be a company that has made the transition from a top-down hierarchy to a peer-to-peer network. I hope that businesses learn to do that. But I'm afraid more likely we're going to see the change in terms of displacement rather than evolution.
Well,
think about it.
Going to come in and sweep a lot of things away, and we're going to have to find new ways of handling it. We're still in the early days, but it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look back to 1999, I can remember wondering, how can you possibly make money out of the internet? Can you sell on the internet? And then 3 years later, the Amazon appeared.
Yeah.
But so do you actually work with companies to help them create a peer-to-peer ecosystem?
Yes, I offer services, but I have to say they're few and far between, because this is a very difficult transition for traditional companies. And I'm more focused on startups who are experiencing growth, because I have this, the management model of the typical startup is pretty consistent. It's the dysfunctional family, and it works because most of us were raised in dysfunctional families, and they work and gave us great skills, and we love them. And we're thankful for the things we had to learn in them. And startups just naturally do that. But when you grow to about 50 people, you're going to have to start having a formal structure.
Yes.
And I'm interested in interceding with leaders at that point, because before they just automatically choose the top-down hierarchy, because that's all there is out there, there is an alternative. It's the peer-to-peer network. And you will design your company very differently, because they will be in units of 150 people, because that's the maximum number of people in which this kind of structure works, then those 150 people will be organized in teams of anywhere from 7 to 12 people.
Right.
If your company grows to 300 people, then you're going to split them into 2 autonomous units of 150 people. People may be able to move between the units if they, if they find work, if a project ends in one. So there's a lot of freedom of movement, but those numbers are very important, 150 and then 10 to 12.
So, okay, so the minute the organization is starting to head into the 50 plus team members, it's time to have a conversation with you and let you be the consultant to aid their structure, because that's the pivotal point where a new structure has to come in usually.
Yeah, and if there are business leaders who are in charge of business units that are large enough, I mean, I can guide them in terms of what I was able to do, what Mullally was able to do in Ford. They may not have the authority to change the hierarchy, but they do have the authority to decide what are going to be the protocols and procedures within their business unit. And a number of people have done that. And in every instance where they do it, it's been highly successful.
Well, I wish you much success with your book, Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody. You've put in a lot of time and thought energy to get it right. And I already the chapter I read was an amazing read, so I recommend it to everybody.
Thank you so much, Nina.
All right. Well, in the show notes, they'll be able to find you. But what's your website, Rod?
My website is Rod Collins, that's RODCOLLINS.net.
Fantastic. And although you're in Texas, you work globally with anybody around the world?
Thanks to Zoom, that's possible.
Well, this is my 4th conversation with you. I'll have links to all the other episodes in the show notes. Each episode kind of handles a different aspect of this peer-to-peer operating system. So thank you very much, Rod. It's been an honor and a privilege speaking with you today.
Nina, it's always a privilege being with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. This episode, I was speaking with Rod Collins, author of Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody and a thought leader on the future of business transformation. He's an expert in exponential growth of the Internet of Things, developments in blockchain technology, and advances in AI. Thank you, Rod Collins, for your amazing insight, and go to the show notes to find out how Rod can work with you. My name is Nina Sunday. This is Manage Self Lead Others podcast, and I look forward to meeting you next time.
Nina Sunday is on a mission to help leaders transform culture. To book Nina Sunday CSP to speak at your conference, visit ninasunday.com to request a proposal. Nina travels from Brisbane, Australia for in-person presentations Australia-wide. Twice certified virtual presenter, Nina Sunday presents virtually, globally, for any time zone.